Hi, my name is Mike Lawrence. This video is one of a set which is intended to provide a different interpretation of the experimental results that constitute the foundation of current physics. It is clear that the present explanation for what we see in the universe is good in many ways, but it is missing an overall coherence. My view is that we need to look at physics with new eyes and consider an interpretation that explains most things well, even if it does question just about everything. I do not disagree with any experimental results, only the interpretation of those results. And I do not say that the hypothesis that I'll be talking about in these videos is the theory of everything, and that everything I suggest is correct, but it is a start. Each video in the set will cover an aspect of physics. The whole set needs to be understood together in combination, because many aspects rely on each other, and any one taken on its own may not be convincing to those relying on the current interpretations, some of whom may actually be offended by the hypothesis. There will be links in the videos to other videos in the set that cover closely related or overlapping aspects. Within the boxes in the videos are representations of the motions of the particles and their composites, which I will be explaining more fully. I'm happy to answer questions where I can, perhaps providing links to where a deeper mathematical analysis shows why I say what I do, since equations and graphs do not make good videos, and will post replies where appropriate on Twitter. I hope you enjoy the videos and they enable you to better appreciate the absolute symmetry and simplicity of nature. But please remember, I'm not an experienced presenter, and although I state everything as if it were correct, this is only a hypothesis. This is video number 32, Quantum Mechanics and Wave-Particle Duality. The quantum environment can be created when a photon is separated into its component loop and antiloop. Having been stacked together, the loops are entangled. As they separate, a tunnel between them is formed by the background merged pairs. Within the tunnel, the background is excluded, so motion of the two loops within the tunnel is not subject to viscosity, and there is no maximum speed limit. The two loops travel from end to end, swapping places continually and probably randomly. What is observed at the tunnel end is the properties of one loop whilst it's there, then the other loop whilst it in turn is there. The average over time of each loop's properties together is equivalent to a superposition of the two loops' properties. The tunnel ends are constrained to move at or below light speed, and the non-locality created along the tunnel only extends to the distance apart in normal space that the tunnel ends have become separated by. This explains why in an entangled two-photon filter experiment, the filter may be thought to have separated out the appropriate photon, and yet the other can still be observed on the original path after the filter. It is because it is one end of the tunnel that passes through the filter at the instant when the unfiltered photon is that end, and immediately afterwards it is not possible to say which photon is at the tunnel end as the two continue swapping places. The same tunnel effect exists between atomic electron orbitals, enabling electrons to move between physically separate volumes non-locally. Therefore, the two systems of relativity and quantum mechanics cannot be reconciled because one exists within the background and the other does not. Using this hypothetical pre-Fermion framework, it is possible to explain how light can be observed as both a particle and a wave, which is a fundamental tenet of quantum mechanics. The explanation is that light is emitted in two parts that are intimately linked at emission and observation. The photon travels within an initially spherical, expanding double shell whose changes in the gap between the shells reflect the energy lost to the background through which it has moved. All points on the outer shell travel at local light speed, resulting in a distorted shell surface with some points trapped where local light speed is zero. The photon moves randomly and non-locally between the shells because the background is always excluded from some of the intershell volume. The initial gap between the shells is set by the photon emission frequency, but increases as the shells expand and lose energy, with the inner shell lagging behind. Observation is either due to the photon stacking, so that its velocity becomes zero, the shell gap becomes zero as it evaporates, and the photon loses frequency to the shell's components, reflecting the energy lost to that point, or alternatively, due to the shells being disrupted, after which the photon moves to a random pre-existing point on the outer shell where its velocity will be zero. The former observation is particulate with no probability involved, whereas the latter is wave-like. The energy transferred to the shells is effectively repaying the cost of the shells moving to that point. The merged paired chains, usually attached to muons in loops when within the background, are absent from the muons in the photon double loop whilst they are in the shell gap. These chains become reinstated as the shell's merged pairs form new chains attached to the photon, which reduce the photon's rotational rate to the rate it would have had it travelled there directly itself through the background. The shell's gap is created between the merged muon pairs in the background that do not themselves travel, but that transmit the wave, as occurs in some types of water wave. Each shell is composed of merged muon pairs. It may be possible to prove this light hypothesis in a slit experiment that disrupts the shell's gaps and causes the photon not to arrive at the observing screen. Related videos would be 6, what separates the quantum mechanic and relativistic environments, and 29, what are photons? Thank you for watching.